And we are back. Brand South Africa says it welcomes the improvement of South Africa's 2018 Index of Economic Freedom. The Index of Economic Freedom provides insight into the extent to which governments enable an open and unrestricted economic environment for citizens and business to operate in. In terms of economic freedom, the Heritage Foundation indicates that with a work rank of 77 out of 180 countries, South Africa is fourth in the African region. The country's overall economic freedom score improved with 0.7 in 2017. And to tell us more is General Manager of Research for Brand South Africa, Dr. Petrus de Kock. Thank you very much for coming to our program.
Afternoon.
All right. Firstly, last year, the administration of President Cyril Ramaphosa started with, investment as the focal area in general to try and improve the sentiment and the image of South Africa throughout the world. So how do you view this in terms of economic freedom, given its diverse nature?
Yeah. No, I think to your point, and thanks for the invite, by the way, to your point, one of the areas that is measured by this index, it measures the open market structure of an economy. And in there, South Africa improves with a full 10 points on investment freedom, for example, which indicates, that in the year also where we, as you indicated, President Ramaphosa comes into place, and we have a tremendous focus on attracting investment, both internal and external, or foreign investment, to the economy, that there's definitely an improvement. We can see that. And I think in broader terms, what this index does, it tries to show the different areas in which government and business operate to enable a freer, one would say, environment for us as South Africans to operate in.
So now you're pleased with the overall upward trend of the country's economic performance, especially given, starting first with the international comparison.
Yeah, I think one thing that's noted by this report, but this is no mystery to any South African, last year we saw in terms of GDP, quarter by quarter, we had some problems, and then towards the end of the year, there was a spike in GDP. So that's one concern called out by the Heritage Foundation in this report, that GDP-wise, we really need to focus on enhancing growth through a range of strategies, and one of those strategies is attracting foreign investment, as the President has been championing. But I think for some broader global context, maybe just some interesting points here. That France ranks 71, South Africa ranks 77 in this index, and two other European countries, Italy and Greece, rank behind South Africa. Two African countries that rank ahead of us is Rwanda and Botswana, and we know that both Rwanda and Botswana have been doing tremendous work in their economies, to open for investment, to free up space for economic activity inside those economies. So I think from a global comparative perspective, much more can be done in South Africa in terms of enhancing economic freedom. However, when you look at this European comparison and African comparison, I think we are in relatively good company.
Now, the statement that you issued says there have been advancements in the areas of property rights, especially with an improvement from 67.6 to 67.7. What informs this? I'll tell you, when you talk about property, and we still have expropriation of land without compensation, there have been concerns that were raised by the banks hitherto this. So now there is a problem when it comes to one explaining a positive sentiments regarding property rights, whereas there is skepticism about that.
No, but that's an issue that we, since last year, since elective Congress, and where the decision was made ultimately, or the end of the previous year, the decision was made to pursue the policy of land expropriation without compensation. I think in the past year, a lot of work has been done by President Ramaphosa and by government to say, yes, we are going through the parliamentary process, we're still engaged in the process working towards what may end up in a change of the constitution on that specific point. However, a tremendous amount of work has been done to say that, number one, we are not looking at a random grabbing of land process in South Africa. No. The process that we're engaging in is a structured process of, firstly, do we need to change the constitution? That was the first question. And then secondly, when we engage in this process, that the expropriation must be a disciplined process run by the state to the benefit of the greater economy and of society. I think people make unfortunate comparisons with Zimbabwe, where we looked at kind of very random invasions of land, etc., etc. And if I look at the statements made by the president, if I look at the manner in which the South African state system has been engaging with this, number one, property rights are still enshrined in the Constitution. Number one, there's a guarantee to that. And number two, if there is a change that leads to expropriation without compensation, it also will not just be, I'm waking up in the morning and I decide I like that farm, I'm going to take it. That's not going to be happening. So I think the reassurance that we need to do as South Africans, yes, there's uncertainty around it, but the reassurance is we're looking at judicial democracy here, and one area where we improve is actually on judicial effectiveness, which shows also confidence in our court systems, confidence in our legal environment to manage these kind of processes appropriately.
Now, you were mentioning Greece and Italy coming behind South Africa in terms of global competitiveness, but when you look at the local front, especially the sub-Saharan region, there's skyrocketing inflation in Zimbabwe. So how do you look at a country that is flourishing, whereas the neighbors are having a very serious economic program, especially with regards to recovery and also a currency that is seems to be having a huge problem in terms of being resuscitated?
No, look, I think if you look in a regional context, you know, a country that's hemorrhaging, you know, a country that has been experiencing problems like Zimbabwe for much more than a decade or two now even, I think we know that it has an effect on a country like South Africa. It doesn't affect its economic fundamentals. It affects two things. It affects either perception of the region, because typically, you know, we still battle Afro-pessimistic mindset out there in the world where people can't distinguish between Cairo and Cape Town sometimes, you know, not knowing there's a continent of 1 billion people there. So that's the first kind of effect. It's a perceptual effect that it has. The second effect that it has, and this is a bit ironic, could actually in a way be positive, because in the long term, the question then remains, your bordering countries are then also the frontline countries that stand to benefit once a turnaround happens in that economy. You know, so I think from a South African perspective, we really need to be careful when we analyze that, yes, citizens have suffered, you know, but when you look at a strategy that aims to turn around the fate of that country, you know, we may be looking at a very different scenario. And the last very important thing is the regional integration process. South Africa signed up in last year, 2018, to the Continental Free Trade Area, which has major positive implications for us as an economy, because the countries that sign up to this are then obliged to start opening very different areas of the economy to activity from the regions. Okay. And I think there South Africa stands a very good chance to benefit tremendously from that.
All right. Thank you very much for making time to speak to us about this report.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. We're speaking here to Dr. Petrus de Kock, who is the General Manager for Research at Brand South Africa. Moving on to other news now, Food Lovers Market says it has launched an investigation to establish the source of the rodent problem. A video emerged on social media of a rat eating food on display at its Diepkloof store. This video has caused a huge public outcry. Food Lovers says it